Afternoon, comrades and everybody that is on the platform. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and actually welcome you all on this important session that Comrade Faiz, our leader of the ANC in the province, but also our member of parliament as a deployee of the ANC, chairing the portfolio committee on small business development, has put together to discuss a very important and an issue very close to my heart. And he is also, because all we are products of the townships as historic areas in the province, and also we are Capenars. We are from the Cape Flats. We grew up, we were actually inducted into student politics in the Cape Flats. So townships are our second nature. It's not something that we externalize. But importantly, I think everybody that have came into this conversation is that as a country, I think post our democratic dispensation, and actually to say Happy Freedom Day belated to all of you, that I think we're always given an opportunity to reflect and pause a moment of what is the meaning of freedom. In this particular moment in 2023, what would we think is the meaning of freedom? And I think, Comrade Faiz, you've actually placed a very important discussion in the context of what freedom is. Because I think all of us, one of the key things we understood from the painful past that actually the townships epitomize is actually the exclusion. Racial exclusion, but that racial exclusion, actually its very source was the economy. It was the economy in the sense that land as one of the very key fundamentals in any economic activity, that helps you to sort of register, your livelihoods, whether, you work, you build factories, it's what actually in business becomes something very important, as a capital asset that anyone builds from. And I think if we talk about townships in relation to this particular conversation, Comrade Faiz, that I think this is something, as you put the topic as expanding economic opportunities in the province, where is the shared and inclusive growth for all of us? And I think this session must answer that particular question, because I think as the African National Congress, we've kept on speaking about inclusive growth. And what is inclusive growth? And I think one of the markers that we've actually used over time since the democratic dispensation is to speak about the form of what that inclusive growth or inclusive concept mean. That form being what we would term historically or previously disadvantaged individuals and communities, which actually townships once again represent. And therefore, where are townships when we talk about economic opportunities? Where are townships when we talk about inclusive growth? And actually, when we conceived the term township economy, have we thought about these spaces as economic spaces, Comrade Faiz? I'm hoping that your conversation would actually delve into that. Is that what makes a township an economic space? Or what is our interpretation of an economic setting? And whether can we say the township does have the characteristics nor the features of actually being such economic platforms? And I think as I conclude in my welcoming, comrades, I really would want to tease out, and I think Comrade Faiz was with me recently in a conversation in a church in Nyanga, where we were invited by a church that did a business breakfast. And indeed, when you listen to stories of a hustle, because this is what in the township and economy is about. Actually, people have adopted this term of we hustle in the township, and whether hustling equals entrepreneurship is something that we need to embrace and think about. But one of the things I think that became very clear hear in that conversation is a lot of a network or an ecosystem in the township that has got stop gaps. Yes, there are people that are trading or are involved in business, but is the environment enabling? We spoke about issues of legislation, and I think Comrade Faiz, as the chairperson, would have taken notes of some of those issues. Amongst others, we talk about the environment, and that environment, comrades, is safety. Safety in as far as one of the key things that we've seen recently is extortions in the townships. So if you talk about a township economy, can you speak about an opportunity to do business in an environment where people must be facing extortion, having to pay some fees to criminal syndicates? What do we do with those kind of realities? And whether do we have government services that would be able to save and protect this particular environment? So I'm leaving you with these questions, comrades, that I think you are capable as entrepreneurs yourselves with experiences on a day-to-day basis in your own hustling and contributing to the economies of your local areas, your municipalities, and your communities. So it's important for you to then bring those in answering the question that Comrade Faiz have raised. And with those words, comrades, I just want to welcome you and say these conversations are very important for us as the African National Congress, especially coming out of a national conference last year, but also preparing for our conference. And thank you, Comrade Faiz, for this conversation, because I would really hit upon you that all the inputs that you shall receive must then inform the discussions of our provincial conference and coining what should be our approach in the Western Cape in taking the issues that entrepreneurs in this platform shall raise and actually factoring in our own response as the ANC, as we sit in the municipalities in opposition, also in collusion in the province, but also in other municipalities, but also in opposition. But also, as we go into the national elections, what are some of the key things that we need to raise into the ANC amongst the realities of the township economy? With those words, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And as it stated, I'm going to be joining another meeting that is seeks to deal with the issue of load shedding, another challenge that small businesses are experiencing. And I will be coming back if the conversation, Comrade Faiz, is still continuing, so that I can listen in. But pardon me for the first part of the conversation, because I'm amongst the two allocated members of the ANC into this committee of Parliament to oversee the spending on the load shedding. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and all the best for the conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nomi. That was Comrade Nomi Kondlo, our Shadow Minister for Economic Affairs, our member of the provincial legislature, and also our head of economic transformation in the province, that just did an opening welcome and introduction to the topic. So, comrades, friends, colleagues, business people, academics, activists, thank you for making time. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes together. The idea is to do one or two inputs. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation that myself and Nomi collectively has put a framework together. Then we're going to invite a few speakers that will also share their insights, and hopefully we'll open the platform in the last hour where people can make short, powerful inputs. Today we have two objectives. We want to educate ourselves. We want to ask ourselves this question: how do we expand economic opportunities in the province? How do we create shared and inclusive growth for all of us? We will sketch a description of what are our challenges. And then I think what we need to do at the end when we get inputs is to look at what's to be done. Why are we having this discussion? What's the way forward? We'll feed it into the ANC process, and this thing is recorded. For everybody that's on the platform, we will be going live on Facebook as well as the Zoom session, and later on it will focus on YouTube all. So thank you everybody that's in the program. I will shoot straight into just going through the presentation and just reflecting on a few issues. So the idea here is to debate, discuss, but also develop a plan. Hopefully we can come out of this where we organize ourselves better, where we plan better, where we develop a plan, a strategy, and we see how we can use that level of activism, mobilization, working together, networking, sharing, and our townships and our dorpies coming together. We've invited a good number of community activists, academics, ANC structures, business people, to share the platform. None of us have the wisdom of all information, but hopefully we as a collective can identify the problem, but at the same time also then confront the issues. So with that introduction, I'll start with the presentation. So where did this start? I think Comrade Nomi spoke about over that Easter weekend, we were invited to a packed whole breakfast, business breakfast in a Nyanga church by Pastor Kandla. Him and his wife, and then we also had a hall full of entrepreneurs, Comrade Tandi, Comrade Lakona, Comrade Limana, and you could see the resilience and shared stories of how township businesses is thriving, struggling, but despite of this, they shared their stories of resilience, they shared their stories of courage and perseverance. And so we want to move away from a welfare mentality where people just focus on the SASSA and the basic income grant and the 350 to get a new entrepreneurial space, a new entrepreneurial society where we create jobs for ourselves and those that surround us. So when we spoke there, the issues of access to finance, access to affordable loans, access to markets, building the bridge between the informal sector, which is mainly your CBD, which is thriving, and the informality of the township economies, informal sectors on the outskirts of town, in our suburbs, our dorpies from Manenberg, Nyanga, Googs, Kailicha, Kraaifontein, where the majority of Cape Townians and live. And we have this concept of township economy and how do we revitalize this. So we talked about describing the problem quickly and then also looking at the framework. So we know, I think all of us know, the unequal economic landscape in the Western Cape. You have growing disparity, and despite 30 years of celebrating our political freedom, economic freedom for most of our people remains elusive. There's still a big divide between those that have and have not, those between the informal economies and the formal economies. So we need, something's got to give. We need urgent intervention. We need to talk about it, not only talk about it, but we need to do something. And we felt that we here in the Western Cape, if you look at the Western Cape, it has a very diverse sector. You have agriculture, you have mining, we have a thriving financial sector, probably the best financial sector. We have film, tourism, services, theater, services, and our province has been known for agriculture products like wine, fruit, and vibrant tourism economy. But we still have a very economically apartheid spatial patterns. You'll see spaces, economic spaces, predominantly still privileged and white, where the economy is thriving, and sectors on the townships and the periphery is decaying. If you compare the township of Mitchell's Plain town center, which was a vibrant town center, it's no longer. And we see a lot of spaces in all of our townships that is not given the necessary attention. And you see the spatial divide. We also see that the ownership, the concentration of ownership is largely still in the hands of a few. We see in all of the industries, if you look at the banks, there's the top 5 banks, and they control the monopolies. If you look at the food, it's the Pick and Pay, it's the Woolworths, it's the ShopRite, it's the Spar Group that control 90% of things. So where is the economic restructuring? And that requires urgent intervention. So I think for us, we also know that the informal sector is those that support themselves, that work, sell stuff on the corners, the gogos that stand by the the tuck shops, the informal sectors that we have. Now, this informal sector provides a lot of opportunities for more than 10%, I would argue. I think the stats suggest more than 10% of Cape Townians are employed in the informal sector. So it is significant, and we need to see how we can bridge that divide between the informal and the formal sector. So what are the sectors that the informal sector do is your street vendors, your retail, your artisans, your plumbers, your fixers, your service providers, your cheese and yamas, and they work outside the formal regulate. Most of them are not registered. They don't have a bank account. They don't have a business permit. They don't have all of these things. And sometimes these things actually work against our people because you can't have a permit, all of those things. The city is very bad because it chases our people away from the parade when they want to trade there. Our informal traders, they get chased away at Gatesville. You can't trade in certain areas in Langa. The township, Mitchell's Plain town center is dirty, filthy. There's no space, amenities, infrastructure on the taxi ranks for our people. There's no street lighting. So these are some of the challenges that the informal sector face. So we're looking at what are the challenges that we need to deal with. It is around the lack of skills that we have, education, experience. And it's difficult to quantify this informal sector, but we want to grow the informal sector. We're also saying that the challenges that the informal businesses face is quite immense. We spoke about the access to finance, infrastructure, access to markets, training, skill development, and also the pandemic. The pandemic and load shedding has really not helped us. And these have continued the vulnerabilities to the economic shocks. The food, price inflation, all of those things are not making it easy. In fact, times are tough. Also, it's difficult. And so what we want to do is to have the discussion around how can we help each other? How do we bring government, the private sector, and community activism and township experiences together to overcome these challenges? Now, we know the city, Cape Town, and Western Cape government, on paper, they've recognized the importance of the informal sector. But we don't see them doing a proactive engagement around how do we deal with this. I wrote a letter to the mayor and saying that there's 40,000 informal traders on doing spaza shops. There is a spaza shop program. How do we ensure that our spazas get registered? How do you make it easy for business to thrive? The permits takes a long time. So I think what we need to do is to look at what must be done around these sectors. Now, if you look at Gauteng and if you look at Western Cape, you have two total different approaches to informal sector. So Gauteng has actually what they call a Township Economic Development Bill, which says that they want to create spaces in the townships that will deal with infrastructure, business support, local procurement, access to finance and skills development. So why is it that the Western Cape don't have this focus on the townships? When we talk about townships, we're talking about all of our suburbs are townships. And Gauteng has the strategy where we're dealing with local economic development at the center, where local is lekker, where we procure local, where we're saying, let's develop markets amongst ourselves. We say, buy black, buy local. Because what happens now, you see a mall going up in each of our townships. You see a shop right in each of our townships. But we shop there, that money gets taken out and goes to our multinational companies. Why is it that we can't ensure that a quota system for malls take place where we say a certain percentage of all malls must have local businesses in that mall, not outside, not on the periphery, but in that mall, say 20 or 30 or even 40%. The city don't have a local procurement policy. The city, in the past, when we were in the city, we argued for a 40% broad-based Black economic empowerment, local content, which means that Cape Townians who or ratepayers also get access to work, access to opportunities. Now we know that our people are good for being the workers, the laborers, but we're never good for getting the contracts ourselves. And it's mainly your old boys clubs that gets these contracts. So these are the challenges that we need to deal with. So the theories of township economy, local economic development economy, circular economy is talking about how, as an alternative, how to deal with the issues of unemployment, inequality of income, and social inclusion. So we're going to suggest some strategies, focuses, and this might not be exhaustive, but it tries to frame our discussion. And when we get all the inputs, we will just put it in together and see how we take it forward. Because we can't just lament and describe the problem. What we need to do is roll up our sleeves and do something about it. And that's what we want to do. We want to work together in a collaborative space and get all our focuses. So the first thing is, obviously, we need to build our own capacity. Our townships, our people must be resilient and focused on capacity building. We need to have the slogan of each one, teach one, where our mentors, we get help from our people. We focus on township-focused vocational training and centers. How do we use the schools and partnering with local institutions to help us with the curriculum, with a thinking of training and focusing on high potential sectors like agro-processing, renewable energies, mentorship, tourism. We need to get partnership between those that have and know how to do businesses, and at the same time get them to help us set up these structures. You know, the thing is, we need to bring experienced businesses to mentor emerging businesses. We need networks, knowledge sharing workshops like this, peer learning, collaboration are key things. I think the second big thing after capacity building and empowering ourselves and constantly learning and sharing is to look at access to finance. You know, this is the single biggest problem that we have. Our banks are not friendly to the poor. Our banks are largely profit-driven, and finance to access business is very expensive. Our banks have failed us. Our top banks, they also do collusion. They failed us to provide affordable finance. And so we need an alternative. And maybe it's time for us to put our heads together and look at a microfinance model. A microfinance model like the Mean Bank, where we stokveld, where we lend to each other, we provide good, affordable rates, and then we plow back our money into a civil, a society or a community bank or a partnership. So this is what we are thinking and we want to put together. Because, say, for example, if all the Chizenyama township communities in, say, Kailicha, there's about 300, I'm just using examples, that sells bride meat, chicken, and at the taxi ranks. We can use the partnership and leverage the networks where all of us buy as bulk, then we get cost. We can all get the same as opposed to each one of us. We can also start investing in ourselves and lend to each other, sell, buy, and in that way we grow this thing about access to finance. We need to look at credit programs tailored to our informal businesses, microloans, group loans, asset loans. Now, in the capacity of finance institutions, there's risk, financial management, and we need client outreach. We need a Western Cape investment fund that can help, where government puts money in, private sector do put money in, and we see how we can crowd in, look at what the investment criteria is, looking at the portfolio, and look at high potential informal business in areas where there's growth. And then obviously look at monitoring and evaluation of this. So that's the big theme of finance. And there is some financial products, I'll speak to it later. CIFA, government's entity, the one that we provide oversight, has loans from 50,000 Rand up to R1 million. But you need to be funding ready. You need to be a going concern. You need to be registered. And you also need to show that you can pay the money back. So there is a grant portion where you get 100,000 Rand for free, but then you pay the loan. I think it's a few below prime, which is a very affordable loan, but you need to demonstrate to the people that evaluate the application that you have a bankable, sustainable business that can sustain itself and also pay back the money. I think the next thing that I want to focus on, and I'm trying to go a bit faster so that we can get your inputs, is infrastructure improvement. Our townships, despite the city saying that it's working for all and first class, we don't have infrastructure in our townships. The lights are not working. There's no public infrastructure. If you look at any taxi rank, you can see when last the city has cleaned, when they have built infrastructure. And so we need to prioritize our townships to make it spaces where we can be proud of, where we can live. That's where we come from. And so I lament the fact that when I go to Mitchell's Plain, the town centre is a shadow of its former self. People are openly using drugs. There's no pride, and the city have neglected our spaces. But we must claim that. So we must see how we can get the businesses forums in each of our townships and say, hey, we're going to claim back, just like we want to take back our streets and claim back and say no to gangsters and drug dealers and taking back our community. We also need to ensure that government, both the city, the provincial and national government, look at our spaces and develop strategies, marketplaces. We need shared workplaces. Why can't we have telecommunications data centers in our townships? Why can't we have call centers in our townships? Why can't we look at, there's this big development now, Amazon here in Observatory, but why can't we also subcontract for opportunities? How do we create business hubs in our townships? How can we ensure that agro-processing in our small dorpies like Prince Albert, we get cold storage, we get opportunities, and we need to crowd in that infrastructure. We need to look at selecting partnerships, like for example, the Philippi market. Is that space open to helping entrepreneurs develop the Philippi food market, creating those spaces that we're talking about, shared spaces, internet access, meeting rooms, business development, incubators, collaboration with informal and informal business hubs. Now, Gauteng has adopted this Township Economy Act, which talks about stimulating growth, creating employment, reducing poverty, and transforming our townships. They even have a model where the high streets of our townships, so like Willakazi in Soweto, where Mandela stayed, where Tutu stayed, and where the 3 Nobel Prize winners stayed, that is now a high street. So why can't we have, let's say, NY1 in Google to become a high street? We make it, we create infrastructure, we have working close to where we're staying. So in that way, we reduce the income, the commute time. In our townships, we create opportunities where we can buy ourselves, buy local. So if a rand stays in a township, and that's the circular economy. If I own a bakery, you own a hairdresser, Normie owns something else. So I pay the 1 rand, then with the money that I get from that shop, that money stays, and the money stays, turns around 4 or 5 times. But what happens now? As soon as we get paid, we go to the shops, and that money leaves our townships. And that plowback is not coming. We want our Pick n Pay and our ShopRites and all of them to say, we want an enterprise development, a supply chain development that nurtures emerging businesses. Why can't Michelle's acha or blatang or product be in the shops? Why can't we develop a market that ensures that we create that opportunity? And how does this platform create a platform to say Pick n Pay, ShopRite, Checkers, Woolworths, what is your supply chain? And how can we get on board more people to grow in that way? I want to come back to the Gauteng Economic Development Act, and what it focuses on is essentially business support, development, making townships affordable, attractive. We're also saying that if we invest in our properties in the townships, say for example, we give people in the high streets of N11 a small grant or loan to upgrade their places so that you can live and work in that spaces. Imagine how things could be. How can we envision our townships to be better spaces? Because that's where most of us are staying. Local procurement, I think we spoke about it. We want all government departments to procure locally. How do we ensure that the big companies like the cleaning companies, the security companies, the busasas, all of them don't corrupt, don't fraud, and don't corrupt politicians, and we ensure that instead of giving it to one big company, we share it. And so Site C Business Forum get the contract of cleaning linen for all the hotels around the Cape Town. So we look at how do we facilitate those opportunities. I think for me, if you look at Gauteng's high 10 growth sectors, it's something that we can also focus on, because they're focusing on these issues that if you transform this, if you look at investment facilitation, value chain transformation, SMME empowerment, active enterprise and supplier development through linking clusters of township suppliers to formal businesses, we can revitalize our townships and the real estate, the property that's attached to our townships. So the 10 high growth areas, and I'll just focus on them quickly, is energy. Energy is going to be a key commodity that we all need to get in. Solar, new technologies, diverse energy, wind, farming, gas, thermal, and also the existing. We need to see how we create community-based energy producing. Why can't we, if we off the grid, instead of giving it for private sector, why can't we say that we want a township energy company? Then we look at generating the energy and also then plowing it back into the grid, because energy is going to be a growing point. And I think that is going to be crucial around this. Transport and logistics, you see the logistics company set up now, and how do we cascade some of those opportunities to our townships? How can we also be part of the logistics hubs that's linked? The digital services, I don't know who Salma is scratching on the presentation. Can you not do that? But tourism, hospitality, food and beverage, agri-processing. You know, in Cape Town in South Africa, the whole agri-processes is still by and large mainly white. We're looking at how do we ensure that from seed, logistics, all of those things, we bring it more so that our people can not only be consumers of food, but also be part of that value chain. Construction, we see that construction, there's a mafia here, and we need to break down some of these criminal economies so that we can formalize our economies. We want a rule of law. We want people to be part of the formal businesses. Financial sector, there's amazing fintech with artificial intelligence, with the chat GPT, with things like that. How are we going to benefit in that? The cultural and creative spaces, we continue needing an outlet for our creativity, because innovation, creativity is what we can grow. And then the president also spoke about industrial cannabis. So I think what we're trying to do here is to say, let's think about big things. Let's cut down. Let's look at what Gauteng is doing. Let's see how we can learn from them. Let's look at what we can do with or without the government. You know, at some stage, we need to keep our government, the city, mayor, and the premier of the Western Cape accountable. We used to have the Western Cape Development Council, Economic Development Council. We don't have a structure. Maybe it's time for us to create structures ourselves and say, let's all of us have a Mitchell's Plain development forum, or a Chachi's development forum, or a Koi development forum, or a Nyanga. And all of these structures come together and we mobilize, we change, we advocate. So it's about changing, advocating for change, and be the change agents that we want. We want the red tape to be cut down so that permits could be made easier. We also want communities to have business against crime. We want business against crime to stop the kidnapping, to stop the extortion. We want empowering of our local businesses, giving opportunities. We don't want handouts anymore. There is the presidential youth employment program, and we want to see how we can get communities to be part of that, to facilitate the creation of jobs. We need to continue looking at how we work together, community awareness, attention to each other, and look at how we keep the city accountable. Each city supposed to have an IDP, integrated development plan. There's supposed to be a local economic development plan. And each ward must have a ward development plan to say, what is the councillor doing for building economic spaces? And we need to keep our councillors and our public reps accountable for this. Local is lekker. And so we need to have this buy black, buy South African. If the banks and the Pick and Pays and the ShopRites and the big shops don't want to create inclusive growth for Black people, then maybe Black consumers need to review where they're going to shop. I'm not advocating for a consumer boycott, but I'm also saying that let's use our economic power by buying to buy by people that is supporting our businesses and supporting our industries. Maybe it's time to have the Western Cape Economic Development Agency and Council again. We have Westgrow, but we need to see how Westgrow is helping all of us, including the townships, not just only investment or the privilege, because you see a tale of two cities. Westgrow is focusing on mainly your established formal business, and they don't create opportunities for us. So part of this discussion is about the system must work for us. It can't be a failed state economically for people in Yanga, Googs, Manenberg, Athlone, and it just works in the city. We must move out of our economic lagers. So we want to encourage existing businesses. We're not the enemy of big business, but we're saying hold our hands, move away from them and us, get ourselves out of the comfort zone, and let's stop the blame game. Even us as politicians, we need to reach out, work together, and let's collaborate. Let's foster collaboration, and also build bridges of trust and build bridges of stakeholder engagement, public-private partnerships, networking sessions. Let's get all hands on deck. Let's build transparency and accountability. And through this, we're calling on all ourselves, the Premier, Mayor, councillors, captains of industry, stakeholders, role players. We're going to have a Western Cape Township Economy Conference in Daba Summit, where we bring together all the relevant players. Today is actually a talking session, but it's also a planning session. We want you not only just to describe your problem, but tell us what you want to do in your spaces so that we see how we can bring as many connections as possible. Let me end there and say, now's the time for us to act together, work together, and create this greater opportunities. We can't change our past. Mandela and his generation opened the door. We had a negotiated settlement. For better or worse, we are where we are. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, our dreams were deferred, but you can't sit back and throw your hands out and say, it's all to the dogs, so we're not going to do anything about it. Now is the time for us to work together. Now is the time to get young people to take over the baton, and also for us to continue keeping on. I mean, that was our slogan when we were in COVID, when we lost loved ones, when things were tough. We need to show our resilience. So let me pause there and thank everybody for listening to me. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. Let me now open the platform. There's a few people that I've asked to speak immediately after me. So I'm going to ask immediately, what we'll do is keep your mics closed. I'm going to still, can we all mute? I'm going to give people opportunities to talk, but in this order, I'm asking Ashraf Adams, who is a economic development specialist. His last job was the CEO of Kabeja Development Agency in the Eastern Cape. I know Ashraf for almost 30 years as an economic specialist. I've thought of Ashraf just to frame the LED discussion, frame what I've said, and also look at maybe where there's gaps. We will take it from there. So Ashraf, I hope I do justice to your introduction. Please keep it short to the point, and
Yes,
thank you for making time again.
Sure, no problem. I hope to be short. And I was at the Mandela Bay Development Agency, not the Gqeberha Development Agency. Colleagues, I'm actually going to challenge you today. I'm going to start off by saying that there are a few things that we know about townships and economic development that needs to happen. It's been spoken about here as well. So one is that we've got to consider townships as economic opportunities arising from human development rather than as problems to be solved. A lot of the work that's going on at the moment, such as the City Support Program, the Township Economic Development Plan, even the Gauteng Act that you referring to, Faiz, really just looks at townships as separate from the rest of the city. And I think that's a very dangerous approach to be using, that we really need to look at one economy and not a township economy. And how do we transform the economy and the spaces within which those economies happen? Because if you look at even the white paper on local government, upon which most of the local government legislation is based, it doesn't talk about economic development. In fact, it says, do not offer economic incentives. It talks about social and economic development. And I think that's a very important point that we need to consider, because if you're going to separate the economy, we're falling into the trap of the neoliberals who consider the economy to be central to everything, whereas it is life that is central to everything, and markets, which is central to the economy, are in fact social activities. And I think that when we look at economics and we look at economies, particularly in townships, we must look at the townships as places of where human potential is being fulfilled rather than problems are being solved. So that's my first point. The second point I want to make is that we need to reduce the general cost of living through improved local economic development and spatial economic efficiencies, especially relating to location of transport, public services, and economic opportunities. If you look at, and it's not only in the Western Cape and Cape Town, if you look at throughout the country where the new public transport systems have been put in, what they have in fact done is to entrench the apartheid system. How do they do that? Because they move people from townships to other areas of work. And all along the corridors, the people who own property before apartheid, or during apartheid, sorry, continue to own those properties, and their property values have gone up, and township property values have not gone up. So the idea of how we design our spaces and hello, and how we design. Sorry, somebody's mic is on. And how we design our spaces are a critical part of how we develop our economies and things, because a lot of economies happen around transport hubs, around where people aggregate and things like that. The third point I want to make is that we really do need to address the deep psychosocial impediments to human development. Remember I said about the local government white paper talking about social and economic development. And if we don't address the psychosocial impediments to human development, the impact of apartheid, the impact of poverty, the impact of violence. So we need to address these issues of domestic and community violence. And the reason why that is so important, in my experience, the construction mafias undermine every form of democratic accountability and democratic participation, and undermine local development and undermine local economic development. And unless we begin to address those things in very real ways as communities, then we are going to have a problem, because you cannot expect the state to be resolved. The state should be, but the state is not. And we need to begin to find ways that are alternative to that. Hunger and malnutrition, clearly issues that need to be addressed. Low standards of education in primary and secondary schooling. I think that some of our trade unions have a lot to answer for. If you look at the way in which teachers and principals are behaving in our schools, there's no leadership. 30% is an acceptable pass mark, and schools, there's a lot of absenteeism, there's gangsterism in schools. And unless we begin to address these things in our schooling and education systems, then we're going to have a problem. The other point I want to make in addressing the deep psychosocial impediments is the use of undeveloped vacant land. Now, townships throughout South Africa were developed on what was called the New Town principles, which were developed in America and the UK after the Second World War. And in South Africa, they took the New Town principles, applied it to apartheid, and what we have a result of is huge swaths of undeveloped vacant land, which are also dangerous land for most people. And we need to understand how we develop vacant land in support of social and economic development. The issue of infrastructure has been mentioned. The beauty of new technologies is that we can actually provide high quality electricity, water, and sanitation at the local scale in what I call a distributed infrastructure provision. We can do that. And that's what we need to begin to explore a lot more. And then I think they should also be pushing the municipalities to use their grants in a more creative way in this respect. But I do want to, as I said, I want to challenge you, and I want to challenge you in a very real way. Why are we even talking about township economics? Why are we even talking about township development when there's one economy? Because I think Faiz mentioned it. When ShopRite opens or these big supermarkets open up in townships, the money goes to the Stellenbosch mafia. The money goes out, right? The money doesn't stay in those areas. What's even worse is that any new development that gets built is built as if it's a prison. There's no decent architectural style. There's nothing that's attractive about it. And it's what I call basic township architecture, where it is defensive in terms of protecting against people breaking in and stealing and that kind of stuff, but it adds no value to the urban or the built environment of townships and things. So townships still look ugly, even though you get a multi-million rand shopping center in there. And talking about grants, I was part of establishing what is called the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant, which National Treasury still administers. And the thinking behind that grant was for government to put in money in a partnership with local entrepreneurs to develop vacant spaces in townships. And I think that we need to begin to look at that again. The other point I want to talk about is the issue of being very careful of simply imposing the thoughts of others into our development mechanism. Now, I've explained to you the issue of transport. Now, that is called transport-oriented development. That idea comes from America. And we have implemented that here wholesale. And as I said, it's made apartheid economics and apartheid spatial structure even worse. My question to you is, at what point do we begin to say, look, man, what you are talking about, even this issue of economic development, is a neoliberal term. It comes from the World Bank. It comes from USAID. Why are we so fixated on the concept of economic development? Because I can tell you, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur will make the best of the worst situations. And societies and people respond to the way in which the state governs or doesn't govern. Go to most countries where there is a large informal sector, and you will see largely failed states. So the question I have to you, I ask of you is, why are we fixated on this concept of economic development and not the concept of changing the lives of where people stay and what needs to change about that? The second last point I want to make is, a lot of what Faiz has mentioned is already in policy. There are grants for that. And I'll just give you one example. I've just come back from a meeting where we are applying for two grants: an agricultural to start growing agricultural product, and secondly, agro-processing to link to that. And I can tell you right now, if the people in this consortium did not have the experience that they have as a chartered accountant, a planner, knowing agriculture, knowing business, knowing HACCP, knowing the safety standards and all that kind of stuff, there's no way you're going to get this grant. So the support that is required is not more grants or more we want this and we want that, but how do we access what is already there? Because this grant that we're applying for is a national government grant managed very efficiently by the Western Cape government. I know that in the other provinces, the same grant is being mismanaged by other governments. So the other question that then I have to ask of you is, what are we going to do to ensure that the people responsible for administering the grants that are supposed to support us in this concept of economic development, in this concept of entrepreneurship, aren't we supposed to rather argue, what do we need to change? We've already done that many, many times, but not what we want, not merely what we want to change. What do we want to change it to? And what are the mechanisms in place that can take us there? And how do we access those mechanisms? And I think that for this type of discussion, or for your next workshop, I think it is the unpacking of the various support systems that government has provided that we need access to, that we need to begin to discuss. And my final point is, this issue of townships has come from 1994, under the Mandela era, when he started off with the concept of from townships to suburbs. Now we must just ask ourselves one question. Why? If from 1994 until now, we've had the same concept, have things gone worse in townships? And that will tell you it's not about the economy. It's about everything else. And so my challenge to you is, maybe we don't engage around economic development, but look at economic development as a consequence of other social relations and infrastructure relations playing themselves out, that we need to make a lot more of an effort to ensure happens and things like that. So I just thought I'd give you a few provocations that you can think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashraf, for those thought-provoking inputs. Ashraf is an economic planner, one of the people that I know for years now that have given us thought-provoking issues. What we'll do, we'll compile all of this, and hopefully I'll do a note of follow-up on the issues that we've raised. Members, I've got a lot of people that we want to get all voices in, so I'm asking your patience.
Sorry, there's one point I forgot to add. One point. And that is something that most people prefer to ignore. And those are the so-called foreigners in our townships. We have a love-hate relationship. And I still advise politicians, and I would advise politicians from anywhere to say, you know, you are talking about these foreigners, these Nigerians, these Somalis, these Bangladeshis, these Pakistanis. Their children are South African citizens, and their children are going to be voting in this country. Wouldn't you rather them voting for you? And to do that, you need to engage, because you know what? Everyone's a foreigner. Everyone's from somewhere else. And we do need to begin to embrace the differences, the beauty of difference, if we are going to get the kind of development we are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashraf. I think that point is well made. Colleagues, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite Duma, one of our preeminent economic thinkers. He's an expert on budgets. He writes extensively. He's also with the think tank outfit, and he's also willing to share some thoughts on budgetary process and also input on this. So, Comrade Duma, I know him as our people's economist. He's helped me to simplify issues. He's helped us with making economies more accessible and more to our people. So, Comrade Duma, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but all the speakers now, I've probably got 4 or 5 speakers. I've also got Comrade Dada from Joburg, who's the head of our thinking in Joburg Metro, also that will speak next. And then we have a lot of community leaders that will also want to get their voices in the room. So I ask your patience in all of this. Comrade Duma, if I can ask you just 5-7 minutes, please. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank
when
you,
I put my screen on, then you know I'm wanting you to wrap up. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So Faiz, thank you very much for this invite. Unfortunately, I came very late, and you were talking about the issue of access to finance, which I want to talk about. I also feel very strongly about. And when you're talking about the people's economist, you know, when the labor force survey came out recently, everybody was texting me, is it true that the Western Cape created 97% of the jobs that were created in the last quarter of 2022. So I obviously I also obviously looked at it. It was 168,000 jobs. And I obviously talked to someone at Stats SA, and I tried to unpack it, but anyway, one of these days, I'll do an analysis for you on the job market in the Western Cape, but that's not what I want to talk about. Just quickly, Faiz, I must really thank you for this initiative, because, when I listen to you and your passion for the subject, it makes me remember why people joined the ANC in the first place. The ANC can make you very angry at the moment, but it's people like you who make South Africans continue to believe in this organization. Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say that our economy is not working for us. We need to have probably what I'd call a mobilizing vision and plan for this economy. We have to have a GDP growth rate of about 6% a year. It has to be binding on the Reserve Bank and National Treasury. If you look at the National Development Plan, they've got a target for 5.4% GDP growth a year and the creation of 11 million jobs. But if you look at National Treasury, the Reserve Bank, there is not a single document where they talk about how they will achieve it, because the National Treasury is about debt, Reserve Bank is about inflation. So if they start prioritizing the targets in the National Development Plan, we should get our economy working. Many more of you will know, number two, I am one of the forefront, the major, I believe in the basic income grant. I've been campaigning for it over the past 3 years, and I wasn't always a campaigner for the basic income grant. About 2-3 weeks ago, I was having a very bad day, and I got this call, and it says, Duma, how are you? Apart from bashing me from time to time, how are you? And I didn't know who this was. And I was thinking, and then he says, I'm the president. Then I'm thinking, the president of what? And then I was so embarrassed as the president of the country. He wanted to talk about the basic income grant and how he wants to see the work that I've done on the basic income grant. This third thing that we have to talk about. So the basic income grant will stimulate economies in the Western Cape, from Mitchell's Plain to Khayelitsha and so forth. It grows the economy. It stimulates small business, as the president said in his letter to the nation. And there's so many benefits of this thing that we should do as a country. Number three, we have to expand our public employment programs. We have the expanded public works program, which creates about 475,000 full-time equivalent jobs. We have a year. We've got the community works program, which creates about 100,000 full-time equivalent jobs. And we've got the presidential employment stimulus, which created 1 million job opportunities. So there's no budget for it beyond 2024. I say, let's amalgamate all these things. Vusin I was talking to this. Let's amalgamate them. Let's create something bigger. Let's create more jobs for our people. There's many work that has to be done in our townships. So what I've envisaged is that people in Mitchell's Plain or Guguletu would be able to make proposals for job creation, and there would be a impartial assessment of those proposals to create jobs, and award jobs at the local level that people propose in their communities. Infrastructure comes up a lot. We are spending too little on infrastructure. I just have to mention that the target in the National Development Plan is 10% for public sector investment. The shortfall based on what we are now is about 400 billion rands a year. And the target for total investment is about 30% of GDP, and the shortfall is about 1 trillion. The fifth thing is industrial policies to grow our economy. And what I can't stand is people say that people are unemployable. We have to create jobs for the profile of the people we have, not the profile of the people we wish we have. Half of the unemployed don't have matric, so we must create jobs. And that's what happened in East Asia. They first created jobs for the people who had the education and skills that they had. And as they expanded education to everybody, then that's what happened. And then they became into more complex industries. And then sixth, we have to have universal public services. I'm a big believer, as as you were talking about education, that is one of the biggest mistakes we made at the start of our democracy. We believe this propaganda that we're spending enough on education. But my family, Ashraf, is from Karecha in the Eastern Cape. If you look at the schools in KwaNobuhle Township, and you say we are spending enough on education, you need to have your head read. So we have to expand education, health, and public energy. You talked about local energy companies. That is something that we could do. And finally, Ashraf was talking about migration. I spent the better part of Christmas. This is last week. I feel very strongly about the whole issue of xenophobia. And I spent the better part of Christmas working with some organization from the UK on regional economic development. To cut a long story short, we've got 3.9 million migrants in this country. About two-thirds of them are from 3 countries. Number 1, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Lesotho. Now let's start with Lesotho. Basotho have been coming to South Africa since the mid-19th century. For all intents and purposes, it's one country. Mozambique, they built Ruth First wrote quite a lot about how they built our gold mining industry. At the turn of the 20th century, early 1900s, 2/3 of the people were from Mozambique in our mines. And they had started coming to South Africa in the 1860s to the 1860s in the sugar and in Kimberley, Diamond Rush. So Mozambicans have been in South Africa for more than a century and a half. And so now what happens, really, the event in our region recently is the implosion in Zimbabwe. So what I'm saying, lastly, I know you're coming here, is that we need to have balance. Migration is a function of unbalanced economic development in our region. So we have to develop mechanisms to create a thriving regional economy. And who is going to be the major beneficiary of a thriving regional economy? It is South Africa. So we mustn't see this thing as them and us, as Ashraf was saying. Let's create an economy that works for the whole of Southern Africa. And lastly, at the age of 11, I went to school in Eswatini. The Methodist Church, and from age he told, we are the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, not the Methodist Church of South Africa. So finally, thank you so much, guys. Yeah, I applaud what you guys are doing. I'll be listening. I wasn't intending to speak, but I just wanted to hear and listen to what everybody's saying. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Comrade Duma. Thanks. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but thanks for always making yourself available. Comrade Duma is one of our preeminent people's economists. He's always focusing on the poor, on the marginalized, and advocating for new monetary policy where we need to spend our way out of our problems. He's a big critic of our current policies. I support him. I think we can do more. So thanks, Comrade Duma, and keep up the good work. I know you're writing on the township economies for the Sunday Times, and keep on and advocating. So Duma is one of those. I'm going to quickly invite my colleague in Johannesburg, Comrade Dada Moreni. He's the chairperson of the ANC in Joburg, and he's also part of leading the coalition in the city of Johannesburg. Now, we see Joburg as the big brother, as the hub of the economic hub of South Africa. And so, Comrade Dada, I really want you to share your insights. Look, I think you're doing pioneering work. The challenges are immense in Joburg. We also have our own set of internal challenges, but the policy framework looks really good. The Gauteng revitalization, the township, the infrastructure. But just share your own experience on this, Comrade Dada. I know I'm putting you on the spot, and thanks for making time. Comrade Dada.
Thanks, Fayaz. I'll try to limit my video just to ensure that I don't lose the connection due to bandwidth. Except to say that in my contribution, I thought I'll touch to what we did in Gauteng in as far as the Gauteng Township Economic Development Act, an act which has biasness towards trying to bring the township into the mainstream of the economy. And part of the argument we had done was first to look at local government first and foremost, to understand the white paper on local government, what it meant, what does it mean, and how could we use that also to help us in terms of local government legislation on contributing towards the township economy. We also looked at the programs that have been done by the provincial government in as far as the development of townships are concerned, and thirdly, looking at the procurement spend of the Gauteng government, including the 3 metros and the two local district municipalities and locals. And the idea was to present an argument that suggests that certain products or industries that government procures from should now be procured directly from the townships, which meant the discussion was around at least about 60% of our spend should then be directed to township economies. Now, what we then said we should be deliberate on is to then develop those products so that we don't appoint people who still go and buy from somewhere else, but encourage that the manufacturing of those products should at least come from the township. And one of the areas that we have been successful towards currently, it's in relation to what we call spaza shops in Gauteng. I don't know in other parts of the country, where you'd realize that we had invested a lot, especially in the east end of Johannesburg, in the east of Johannesburg, where we invested in ensuring that those spaza shops are owned by locals. And we had ensured that we participate actively in investing in the organizations that are responsible for running those spaza shops in the townships. So in the main, that's what the Township Economic Act helps us to achieve, and so that we can argue in government on the basis of the act that yes, we can use the ability of the state to procure and redirect at least 60% of that procurement to townships. So in the main, that is what we had focused on, and we're hoping that through it, we'll be able to firstly establish industries. Two, will ensure that we empower people in the townships. And here I'm referring to areas like Soweto, Rado Park, lands, in fact, what we used to call the previously disadvantaged people, to ensure that they can gain access through this act. We're also looking at enterprise development, and we are creating a supplier database or a supplier development database that will ensure we've got the sense of what industries are existing within the township, support them through a funding model that we are developing, or we have actually developed within the Department of Economic Development. And that model will then assist to finance the development of these industries and enterprises within the township. So in the nutshell, as we implement this, it will then be directed through what we call the township economic zones, which are designed to help us grow these businesses in the township. Can I conclude my input? And thanks very much, Fayaz.
Thank you, Comrade Dada. That's our chairperson of the ANC in Joburg Metro. Very innovative, very challenging, very great work that we would like to do, how we can share experiences. We here in the Western Cape want to connect with you. There is a question, Comrade Dada, how do we connect with yourselves, people? There's some people on the platform also from Gauteng, from Joburg. So maybe Dada, if you can share your contacts on the chat, or a contact where someone from the economic department. We did ask the MEC, Comrade Tasneem, to also be part of this. Hopefully we can get at the next occasion. I'm going to quickly, we're going to open the floor now. Thanks, Comrade Dada. I'm going to ask Comrade Mehmet Vida to open his platform. Comrade Mehmet is an MBA economist, founder for Truth and Solidarity. He's a humanitarian. He's been working in our townships here on the Cape Flats for the last 22 years. I know him really well and active in Mitchell's Plain. He's also the president of the Cape Town Alternative Chamber of Trade and Industry. So I'd like him to just share some of his experiences. Then after that, we'll ask Comrade Zout Mare to talk about, or he'll talk next on the Koi and Sand Chamber, Economic Chamber. So Comrade Mehmet, again, also over to you. And thanks for making time. And the floor is yours. Mehmet, you're still on mute, so if you can just take it off mute.
You know?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hi. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to everyone. So the biggest problem right now we are facing township is extortion gangs. So right now is in Kailicha, Nyanga, Langa, and Fulani, totally controlled by extortion gangs. And in recent development, what happened in human development employee also got killed in Delft, which is again by extortion gangs. So if you cannot fix extortion gangs problem, there's no ways we can fix the township. Second problem, which you guys not pointing, is the entrepreneurship. So we got over, says about 39% right now nationwide youth are unemployed. So we need to teach them how to become entrepreneurs. So we need to also develop in township, especially education or classes for youth to become entrepreneurs. So as Mr. Ashraf mentioned, so when on those classes, we can teach youth how to access those funding. And CETA and CIFA can become part of the progress. So small business finance agency as well as small business development agency, it's not active in township whatsoever. And thirdly is, especially Western Cape, the leader of the Western Cape, I'm talking premier as well as mayor, they are not qualified to be a leader position to lead township right now. Unfortunately, they divide townships between, for example, Mitchell's Plain or Kailicha. You can't enter Mitchell's Plain if you're black. You can't enter Kailicha if you're brown. You understand? It is serious problem right now we are facing internal matters. So we need to discuss those issues in a serious manner now. A man, for example, colored man need to have access to Kailicha market without any question. When he drive his car or when he drive his business to Kailicha or Nyanga or Langa, he need to be freely drive. Like I remember a couple of years back, Mr. Jacobs came out from Langa in the robots. His car got broken, and almost he got robbed. So that's what's happening in township right now. Township economy is totally destroyed by wrong mentalities. I'm sorry, if you live in Cape Town, especially Cape Town, I'm talking, Cape Town only not based on Sea Point or Constantia or Crewford, for example. Cape Town based in mainly populations living in Cape Town is Delft, Lavender Hill, Mitchell's Plain, Langa, Nyanga. It is a serious problem there. So number one, as I mentioned before, first we need to fix extortion gangs right now. Extortion gangs are serious problem in Cape Town. You cannot develop like, for example, housing, simple housing method. How do you want to develop businesses? And housing which is developed by City of Cape Town cannot bypass those extortion gangs right now. Like, especially I'm talking about Cape Town right now. Cape Town is governed not by DA at the moment, is governed by gang groups. So this is a serious problem we're facing, Captain. So the foreign businesses, and they're paying, for example, protection fee those gang groups. So they are enjoying the fruit right now. And local businessmen is no ways we can access these opportunities. We got serious problem we need to face still. We tried in the past to build some, develop those kind of business, especially we tried in Tafasakh, in Mitchell's Plain. We work with the counselor. But I noticed, my personal view is, the city of Cape Town doesn't want to help the local, especially disadvantaged communities, to help them upgrade them. No, they don't. I saw that. They put in puppet counselors, which is not capable to run the jobs. They just like, they put anybody, whoever they like at the moment, as especially mayor, for example. He's not capable to run the city, but he's a mayor. There's another one is acting as a premier. He's acting like a president of the country. He doesn't know his position. You understand? So I'm sorry. This is a serious problem right there. So we need to figure out how we're going to, the solution right now, for my personal view, is the Western Cape. If you want to be successful, you need to remove DA from the power. Simple and basic, without any question. And then bring the people like Mr. Jacobs is a genuine man. We need to give the opportunity to the gentleman to fix the Cape Town in proper way. It is opportunity. Like I remember Ibrahim Rasool, under his leadership, actually Cape Town was progressing that moment. If you like it or not, I'm sorry. Yes, ANC, we're talking about bad leadership of ANC. But we must also look at the good leadership of ANC in the past, which they done so many good for our local people. I have been witnessing the situation. What I'm seeing Ibrahim Rasool period, and I'm seeing the Alan Wynne period, I promise you, like from my personal view, one Ibrahim Rasool was 100 Alan Wynne, I would choose one Ibrahim Rasool. Simple and basic. And I'm not pro-ANC, by the way. I'm not pro-ANC whatsoever. I'm just talking truth from my personal perspective. I thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Mamet. I promised I didn't prompt him to say those words. Mamet is one of our critical, actual successful entrepreneurs on the township. So thank you for that feedback. I hear you around what we need to do, the criminal economy. I hear your passion. Continue doing the work that you are. So comrades and friends, I'm going to try to accommodate everybody. Zalt, you next. Zalt Mare is representing a Khoisan business chamber. And then after that, I'm going to invite our comrades from Menenberg, Chachis, Comrade Gato, and Amelia, you will be after Comrade Zalt. So what we'll do is we want the voices of the townships also. So I'm going to, if there is any of you, just put up your hand and then we'll give everybody on a platform. At some stage, just before we close, before 4, we'll try to look at wrapping up and what's the next step. So I'm asking all of us just to introduce yourself, your issues, your context, and then I think the next thing also is how's way forward. So Comrade Zalt, you next, and then Comrade Gato, you'll be on standby. Comrade Zalt, over to you.
Honorable Jacobs, thank you very much, and thank you for the previous speaker, Ashraf, Duma, Dada, Mamet, well incited, and I think we've learned a lot from you, and I think the foundation is being laid for us to just get stronger. As Honorable Jacobs has said, I'm basically director of the Kuna and Nguni business chamber, recently taken over, but of course I also wear many hats on my side. I'm also president of from the Rugby Union. I also serve chair of the Elam Dairy out in Elam, also chairman of the Moravian Church Trust of South Africa. So you can see my involvement in community is long. My specialist skills is more on the corporate governance and the tax. So I also assist widely in small and medium business to make sure that the compliance and governance, and I think that is a big challenge at the moment with our small, medium businesses where we can't have our governance and compliance. And as you know, for us to access the funding, that is the first stumbling block actually that we always hit things. And I know it's one of the most boring and frustrating things to get your governance and compliance in place, but that is a fundamental must. I mean, it's a not negotiable must. And I think that alone deters about 50% of our prospective businesses from from going forward. And of course, let us see how we can get there. I know we've got exceptionally a lot of red tape in our small and medium business, but that is unfortunately the current laws in place. But maybe through this forum, we can engage our government to say actually how we can streamline these kind of things to enable the environment for us to operate much more smoothly. I think what we should also need, basically, all the big corporates, they or most of them have what we call enterprise development funds. And if we can get a listing of all that actually and share it amongst our members to see actually how that, especially from a transformation and a partnership, and how they can also assist in governing through. Now, I mean, coming back to the Cape, you know, the Khoi Nguni people, primarily the Khoi, was one of the first business people here on the Cape, and maybe they were very good at what they were doing before the Caucasian brothers arrived here. And I think we were robbed of the opportunity to continue to trade. And I think it's in our blood as the best traders going back to the 1400s and the 1300s, and that was dampened. And sadly, I mean, Western Cape is maybe one of the more racist probably places also, and people don't want to share and outreach. But I think as forums us together, we must use our bargaining power and our buying power, as was said, actually, not to say we want to enforce those consumer boycotts that we did in the 70s and the 80s. That worked pretty well for us in terms of it. And we must partner and work with those people who's prepared to partner with us. And I think the big business got a duty to ensure that all businesses actually do succeed in terms of it, because we don't want to use the term that most of them got rich of blood money in terms of it. And where is the reparations? Where is the restitution? When are we going to keep them accountable to start doing this? And the Khoi and Nguni people is crying out, actually, there's very little land available for us even to do and explore. And of course, agriculture should become a very integral part of the development, actually. And from there, actually, we can have a lot of small downstream businesses throwing up and developing. And me, being also involved in the sports arena, we've got thousands of sports fields over South Africa, right? If we can partnership with all our municipalities and say, all our sports clubs together communities, let's see what kind of businesses, small business we can put up at every sports club, as opposed to only training and practicing there and opening the canteen on a Saturday. And I'm sure we can get a vibrant hub of businesses just alone on every sports field. And in that way also, we can protect also the safety and everything of the sports field. And I would strongly see how we can get municipal legislation relaxed in that regard. And of course, if the bylaws need to be relaxed and written, let us lobby the councillors and I think that kind of reach out to the people and is from a political point of view. If you and others actually can make that commitment to the constituency, believe me, the support will come through flying in terms of it. So that is my bit in terms of just. I mean, we've got in the Western Cape, there's only one black-owned dairy in Elam in the Western Cape, and we got a partnership with Lactus. And but sadly, the dairy did produce milk for the people, but the pasteurization thing wasn't there. So going forward, actually, we want to make sure, like a small village like that can produce milk, cheese, and butter as a minimum for its people. And I think if we can encourage all smaller villages, maybe small stuff like that, to do it, and then for each and every household to see how they can tap off into it. I mean, we went to go visit a wine farm up the road from Elam the other day, and very surprised also now the first black-owned wine farm up the road from Elam. And we're speaking about how we can partnership and supply them with our milk tarts and whatever in terms of it, so we can partnership also. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Honorable Sid, and let's see how we can start to work together, because on our own we can't do it, believe me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Zout. Look, I think we all help, all ideas help. So what we'll do, we'll continue sharing contacts, maybe in the groups, in the chat group, share your emails, and we will also share documents and all of that. Now I want to invite the community of Manenberg, led by Amelia and Comrade Kato, the Chachis community. They are indigenous people on Manenberg, claiming space, ensuring that we want more accountability and also their rightful space. After them, we'll get the Empire Bus, which is, I think, a group from Eldorado Park, and then I'll give Miss Mayiba from Tesca an opportunity. So we'll do it in that order. Comrade Gato, Amelia, over to you.
Hi there. Can you hear my word?
We can hear you loudly and clear. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, as was said, that we are an indigenous people living on the Cape Flats, and we are implementing a turnaround strategy at a very localized level. And the context for our turnaround is that apartheid did not end in 1994. And it's imperative for us to start from that premise. So some of us talk about apartheid as if it ended, and we say apartheid did not end. And just to qualify that, what we are saying is that the 94 transition cannot be claimed that the whites handed back the land. The economy was not handed back. The culture that we practice is still a Western culture. It's a foreign culture that we have embraced as Africans. And now we are stuck because we are trying to find solutions through a Eurocentric way of problem solving. What I mean is that in our culture as Africans, we are saying the people actively participate in such a process. And that is why we had the PDC, the Provincial Development Council, that was set up, but it was disbanded by the DA and Alan Zille. And we make this point because it is an important point, is that in our culture, there was reference made to the relationship between the government and the people was very strong. But today, we are faced with a situation where decisions are being forced down our throats, and that is not our culture, where decisions are made for us without us. So for us, apartheid, we are getting a second bite to actually implement what we were supposed to implement in 1994. So for us, we applaud this process that is being highlighted. We think it's an important one, but we also want to say that we need to maybe move this conversation away from an online conversation to actually a face-to-face conversation, and that we need more time together, because this conversation is a very critical one. So we thank you for that. What we're about is about restoring the relationship between the government and the people. So between 1994 and 1996, there was a good relationship between the government and the people when we set up development forums in every community, right? And that was the start of bringing about change. But then we actually stopped in 1996 when we endorsed the Constitution. And when we endorsed the Constitution, what we actually did was we abdicated our role as people and we handed it over to the government to problem solve. So that for us is the starting point, is that the people abdicated their responsibility and they said government must solve everything. And now we're realizing that that is flawed because you have a dead society and all the solutions are coming from government. And that for us is the root of this problem, is that we need to restore our African culture in which the people participate in decision making. So for us, we want to drive that kind of process. We are starting to reimagine an Africa where the people govern and not a Western democracy where we are governed through a white system, right? And that needs to change. That for us is the fundamentals of bringing about change. So that is just my input. I want to say that in the churches, we are restoring the African way of doing things. So we are building pockets of ownership where people take responsibility. We are taking open spaces of land and we are building food gardens everywhere we can. We have started our own schooling program where we teach our kids, because we have so many kids at home who are idle. So we are taking responsibility. We are empowering our people through economic activities where we are saying we need to make our own bread, we need to make our own furniture, we need to make our own clothes. It's at a very small level, but what we are saying, we are taking ownership of our own destiny. And we are saying to strengthen that ownership, we must restore the relationship between the key people and government as equals, not as a government dictating to us, but a relationship in which the government and the people work together as one. Because the people who are getting away with murder is actually the white community, because they are unaffected, but we are fighting with the government. And we need to take note of that, is that the root of our problem is that our people are still living in poverty, our land, we are still landless, and that transformation hasn't happened. So for us, we need to look at spatial planning when we talk about economy. How do we integrate the rich and the poor to live side by side? That to us is a critical part of the change. The last point I want to make before Tara comes in is the issue of the big, which was raised earlier by Comrade Duma. We're saying that we accept that the big will stimulate the economy, but instead of calling it a big, we need to call it reparations, right? And we are saying, instead of a big, let's have reparations where the crime that we have been dealt with, that we are faced with every day, must be remedied. And we are saying everyone who is not white should receive reparations of 1 million rand each, and that will also contribute towards stimulating our communities. Tara?
Yeah. Hi there. Thanks, Faiz. I think that what we've realized over the years is that when communities or villages come up with problem solving and things that's working for, that will work for them, that there's a shutdown by the government. So we're not sure whether the CIA is central to viewing all who's busy with what and so forth. Because if you look at the village banking that also started a couple of years ago, those were shut down by the government as well. Now, what I also want to introduce is the issue around the Grameen Bank. I'm not sure, maybe some of you heard about it. The Grameen Bank started in Bangladesh, where what they started to say was that they need to provide a comprehensive financial service to empower the poor to realize the potential and to break out of the vicious cycle of poverty. So the first speaker was saying that that we should look at economic and or the social economic changes. So with that banking model, what a banking model does is that it brings the poverty issue into conversation. So what we need to do, if we look at the banking system or a economic system for our people, we should look at what are the type of poverty indicators that we want to see is going to be part of this economic system. So how do we, what are the tick boxes for us as the people living in poor or the communities living in a particular context? What are the things that we want to see? People have running water, people have dignified shelter, they have food, they have clean clothes to wear every day. So we can have a list of indicators. It can be 20, it can be 10 indicators that we have in terms of how do we make sure that each person will live in dignity when we enter that economic model that we are speaking about. And that will take us to a process where we can say that families are then being sorted. It's not just individuals, and you can end up like each community has all these poverty indicators are being covered. So I think that it is possible for us to speak about economic development in the context of speaking about social economic in terms of what are the poverty issues, and then there's the monetary issues, and how do we go about making that those two are speaking towards each other. But like I said, there is a model that's already been showcased. It was introduced into South Africa as well in the past, and it wasn't taken forward. So thanks for that.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues from Menenberg, for those inputs. Appreciate it. We'll put all of this in the pot, and we'll take the way forward. I really want to get all the voices in, and thanks for sharing all your contacts and networks, because some of you have individual business proposals, some of you have broad comments, but I really want to give everybody an opportunity. So I'm going to hand over to Empire Business. I believe you are from Eldorado Park. Please address us, and then I'll give, I also acknowledge Atlantis Business Chamber that's here. And so we'll give everybody, Ms. Miaibo, you will go after this. Juliet, you'll go after the comrades from Eldorado, okay? Over to you, comrades from Eldorado, and welcome, and baie dankie for joining us from Johannesburg side. Orsinila, you muted, my comrade. There, now you can talk. We can't hear you. I can see your mouth going, but the sound is not coming through. If it is a problem, what we want to do is we would ask you just to, I suggest you log out and log in again, so that the sound is coming from your side. Whilst we do that, we'll give we'll give Juliet an opportunity, then we'll link up again with you, okay? Comrades, feel free to take your lunches and coffees. Yes. We're having working time now. So Comrade Juliet, is over to you. Please introduce yourself and the organization. Welcome, Comrade.
All right, thank you so much, Comrade. I don't know if you can hear me. Am I audible?
Loud and clear. Yeah, you're audible.
Are you able to hear me?
See you. Thank you. Yes, loud and clear.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity and for the platform as well. I'd like, as you said, my name is Juliet Miaibo. I'm from an organization called TEXA, which is Township Economy Community of Southern Africa. We have branches, or our network is based nationwide, but what is important about our network, it's not just a national network, it's a community-based network. As I speak to you now, I see some of my colleagues from the Western Cape did log in. From Mitchell's Plain, I see Ishsan is here. I'm not sure if Ms. Verlin is here, who's from Lansdowne, but our focus to say that everything has to work bottom up. As much as we have a lot of national strategies and we've got provincial strategies like we have in Gauteng, which is the TIDA, nothing works unless you get things right at a local level or at a community level. TEXA is one of the organizations that gave input to the bill that led to the Act TIDA. So we've contributed extensively and we've engaged with that document. As I speak to you 2 days ago, we were having a meeting with the local government that is focusing on Region D. We're looking at issues of informal sector. And with that, let me be quick. We're raising the fact that the informal sector cannot be ignored. We call those SMMEs nano SMMEs. And those SMMEs, Mr. Maponya, Dr. Richard Maponya, the late Dr. Richard Maponya, and other entrepreneurs that are successful, they started off either selling in the street or selling in the household. So we need to realize the importance of informal sector. It's informal, but it needs to be mainstreamed. So when we do speak about township economy, we have to actually include strategically and in our planning for informal sectors. The local economic developers, we've been going around the country recently. We had a project where we went to different communities, and it seems like they okay. The LEDs need to have specific plans for the informal sector in order to mainstream them, not to keep them as formal forever or perpetually. And as recognized, and we take up the issue of foreign nationals. I know that is a very debatable issue, but it's an issue very close to our hearts, because what we are saying that the immigration laws and the Constitution of South Africa clearly states that people who are here as asylum seekers, they are not supposed to be operating any businesses in whatever areas and communities that they're in. So what we are seeing that there's a negligence in terms of those specificities. So if we're saying we have to be all inclusive, let us be inclusive and be more Afropolitan, I do agree, but we need to recognize the impact that that has on small businesses. And also we do have big businesses that are South African, Pick and Pays, ShopRite, that affect our small businesses. But township economy is faced with a lot of challenges, and we need to be loyal first and foremost to our people. And the other problem is that the foreign nationals that you find in our communities do not even bother to employ our people. They ensure that they only employ foreign nationals. So it's a continuous debate. So from our side as TEXA, I don't want to overstay and have a lot of input, but we can always engage later. We'd like to be part of the process of making sure that bills and acts such as TIDA are able to be implemented or introduced in other townships and in other provinces. I know the KZN are working on some projects, but what I emphasize is that as we discuss, I know we're all talking Soweto, Mitchell's Plain, we're talking other townships. Let us not ignore townships such as Mzamoyetu. Mzamoyetu is just next door Hout Bay. Hout Bay is one of the richest places in the country, but the people of Mzamoyetu can't even afford the basics. So let us look at those areas, how we can empower those spaces with entrepreneurship, because there's no hope for employment there except employment from SMMEs. So as TEXA, as we are saying that these issues, and I'm glad Comrade Dada was here, and I'm glad everyone else spoke, and we took a lot of notes. But we cannot take some of these issues lying down. We have to act. And what we do is we are a lobby, advocacy, and facilitation network. So our job is not to talk, but it's to lobby, and it's to advocate, and to facilitate, such as CEDA, TREP, and other NYDA, and other institutions that are there, that are actually being set up with our taxpayers' money, that they must actually serve communities and communities of SMMEs, starting at a community level, because you cannot talk province when you know that there's nothing happening in Bonteheuwel. I spent 10 years in Cape Town, so I know Cape Town very well, and later moved back to Johannesburg. So let us please be focused and remember that only at the community level, whether you call them dorpies, whether you call them townships, Oksalayo, that is where our people are, and that is where all the action must happen. Thank you again for the opportunity. And I think it's a great initiative, Comrade. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Juliet. We will definitely call on you and your organization. You have a great reach and important role. Continue doing the great work. I'm going to invite Chief Keith Duarte. We missed you, but I hope your sound is now clear. We have still 15 minutes or so, so I'm going to invite the Chief, and then I'm going to invite Atlantis, and then we'll have wrap-ups to look at way forward. I don't want us just to talk in the air, but concretely, when are we going to meet again? What are we going to do? Who's going to take responsibility? And how do we ensure that we pull it together? So, Chief, over to you. Welcome again, Comrade from Eldo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Am I audible?
Yes, now I can see and hear you. Continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, through you, I firstly want to thank I firstly want to thank the presenters that presented. Thank you very much. That is informative information. My name is Chief Kamki Duarte. I am from El Dorado Park, an SMME entrepreneur and a community activist. So we hear this about township economic development. But now, Chairperson, through our sorrow, this township economic development plans that is there, we see it as the Constitution. Beautiful on paper, but nothing that happened practically or enhance our people or benefit our people practically. Now, Chairperson, there need to be a change of direction. There need to be a change of mindset. And I want to concur the sentiments of the churches, Dan Menenbergen. I share the sentiments for the reason being that everything looks good on paper, but nothing is implemented. And the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable communities like El Dorado Park. El Dorado Park is Gauteng's biggest so-called colored community. But believe it or not, we have SMMEs here in El Dorado Park that is fighting over a bone, a dry bone. Limited opportunities are available here with contracts coming into the community, with contracts. All neighboring communities are fighting over bone, small piece of bone, meaning that principal contractors come into our communities and then we must subcontract. This subcontract also requires a lot of red tape, compliances, etc. So now, Chairperson, we really appreciate your intervention with regards to looking into our direction. But no, now with regards to the churches, how they articulated themselves, we want to simply put it as one word, two words actually. There need to be restorative justice for our so-called colored communities that has been purposely, economically deprived from economic growth. Chairperson, we don't have to look far. The last time we protested at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we've asked them for logistics, just to find out how many so-called colored communities, and I'm not racist, please understand me. I strongly believe as a cultural chief that first and foremost, before we look at anybody else, or because we first have to look at them and we have to say they are all human beings. We are all human beings on this earth. As the chief of the Taibosh K Korana Royal House, we are non-racist. But our practical, logistical assignment at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has proven to us that we are purposely marginalized. Guess what, Chairperson? At the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, in Sandton, Johannesburg, we have none, zero so-called colored communities that's registered on the stock exchange. Now that surely is economically excluded from the growth of the country. Chairperson, I don't waste any of the members or your time on this. What we simply are saying, Chairperson, it may look good on paper, but you need to come and prove to us that's on the ground here, that it works and it's equal. It's equality that's work. In actual fact, Chairperson, we in El Dorado Park feel that our democratic rights are being violated. Our constitutional rights has been violated because we are not treated equally in this country, just because the color of our skin. Chairperson, I don't want to make this a political thing, but this is true sense of, this is how our people feel on the ground. We appreciate Comrade Hendrik April coming there to the pop center. We took it from there, Chairperson, in a very good way, in saying, here's something Comrade Hendrik April is bringing, and here is also showing proof to SMMEs that has grown. Now we want to latch on their, Chairperson, and I believe this is a follow-up of our meeting that happened in Alberta's Pop Center. So, Chairperson, all that we are saying, we are asking for honesty, we're asking for transparency, and we're also asking most of all to be treated equally in our country. We do not want to be excluded, Chairperson. I think the request is very simple. You heard Mitchell explain. You also heard the previous speaker talking about the same thing. Why must specific people just benefit? Chairperson, on my last point, and I'm talking on behalf of SMMEs in El Dorado Park, you heard my cry, you heard our cry that we must fight over a bone that we have to fight each other over small projects that come, and we end up being subcontractors. Right. So, Chairperson,
Thank
my
you.
request. I've also heard Comrade Dada, which I salute. I salute Comrade Dada has stood in solidarity with us in El Dorado Park when we camped out in front of the police station. 100 days we camped out in front of the El Dorado Park police station, and our cry was service delivery. Comrade Dada came forward as the mayor at that time, and he pledged solidarity with us. We also said to Comrade Dada, Comrade, we cannot just grow in one department. This must be a multi-pronged approach. A multi-pronged approach. We cannot just put our efforts and concentrate on the economy. We need to concentrate on social. We need to bring all departments together to address the social injustice of our people. We have to bring all departments to the ground to address our social. We've been crying since 1990. So, Chairperson, you know, as an indigenous activist, I've seen the cry, I've seen the hurt in our people's faces, and the request that I'm making, Chairperson, is that please, Chairperson, let this not be one of the programs where it's a tick box exercise. Let us benefit from this program. Amase. Thank you.
Amase.
Thank you. Amase, thank you very much, Chief. Powerful words. We'll pull it together. I think that's why we are here. We're hearing the voices. We're hearing the plight of our people across the length and breadth of our communities. I'm going to give a comrade from Atlantis, the business chamber, the last opportunity. Then we'll pull it together. I think we need all the voices. We need engagement. And from our side, certainly, I'm going to see how we can wrap it. We're going to look at how we pull it together. This is certainly not the last time that we will talk to each other. I think there's a lot in the room, a lot of information, a lot of sharing, but I think there's also hope. So with that, I want to invite comrades from Atlantis. Please, the floor is yours, and then we'll pull it together. You can put on your mic and your speaker, comrade from Atlantis.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. My name is Saul Smith. I'm from the Atlantis Business Chamber. Firstly, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. In fact, what you've done now is quite important. It's quite relative to our situation in Atlantis, and I appreciate the opportunity to raise our voice here. I'm sure you have your own reason for doing this. You have started the initiative, and I'm sure you have done this because of the plight of our communities, especially our rural communities and our township communities. Well, I would like to say that we've got a lot of challenges in Atlantis, but I'm not going to speak about the challenges today. I'm sure that the next occasion will focus more on challenges and how we can address that. I would like to inform the group on the Zoom virtual platform that in Atlantis, I don't know if many of you know Atlantis, we actually are currently the face of the world when it comes to economic empowerment, economic development. Not so much empowerment, because that's the way we come in. Atlantis Business Chamber has been in existence for more than 8 years. And our sole mandate is to see the transformation of economic situation is taking place in Atlantis. We have made a few strides. I believe we can make much more, but I think because of the many challenges that we have, that is maybe what made us to not achieve our goals in some instances. So I would like to speak to them about the challenges at the next opportunity, but for now, what I would like to request, maybe, especially to you, Mr. Jacobs, and I would first like to thank you for the assistance your office or your office has given us in the past, addressing some of our challenges that we had here. But from our side, I would like you to assist us in in addressing the poor communication between the different departments, especially when it comes to the CEDAs and the CFAs in the Department of Small Business Development, because these people usually have programs, and the time that we hear about these programs is only after the fact. So it would be much more beneficial for us if we get the information beforehand and in time. The other thing we'd like to also say is that we had the Minister of Monitoring and I'm not sure the correct name of the minister that was here, but monitoring and evaluation is quite important in projects that is happening in Atlanta, since the government invite investors to invest in our town, but they don't monitor how these investments are utilized or submitted to the community. In fact, what happened currently now in the private sector is these guys use the divide and rule tactics to gain optimal profit and to share and not to share the profit with communities locally. These challenges that I will speak to this group in detail in the future, but I was sure when I ask for assistance, you would understand that for instance, two major companies in Atlanta, which is Hisense and PF Nanoven, they are making big bucks here, and they actually don't really involve the local people, especially the local business forums. And they know why. We also know why. It's just that sometimes we have to push and get support from especially government and the divisionist government that have signed these deals with them. So for those kind of things we will speak about in the future. For now, I would like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to raise our voice. I also believe that you won't make this the last event for this for now. I hope that the business chamber contact details are quite clear so that we can stay in the loop for the next opportunity. I thank you, Mr. Jacob. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, comrade. Yes, so we've got a lot of inputs, a lot of presentations. Comrades, what I want to do is maybe just try to pull it together. Let's start by saying that this is not the first time. I want to start by also acknowledging all the voices that's in the room. There's many of you that didn't get a chance to speak. Comrade Sylvester from Matsikama, Comrade Apollos from the Boerland, Comrade Rhoda from Makassar. All of you are acknowledged. Some of you have very specific issues. So I know Comrade Wes, for example, you're busy with the Kailicha infrastructure investment company. You have very specific issues. The comrades in El Dorado, we just had an outreach program 2 weeks ago where Parliament basically forced all the government departments to come into El Dorado and look at creating opportunities. So we will continue leveraging networking. I know, Ihsan, you also wanted to put your voice into the room as a Mitchell's Plain leader. Lenny, thanks for being there and offering your advice. We're keen to look at partnerships between the work that FETs are doing and creating entrepreneurial training for that. It's important for me to make all of us connect with each other so that we can see how we pull it forward. I think the framework is there that we need solidarity, that all the voices that came here, it's about how do we pull it together. Now, I think it will be important if all of you are willing to, or if there's some of you amongst yourselves that's willing to help with the coordination of this group. We're basically wanting to organize ourselves better, and structures like TEXA, structures that's organically up there already. We need to see how we move from creating awareness, creating consciousness, creating solidarity to actually doing specific projects in our specific areas. We have a lot of our young leaders, our youth leagues that's here, and they were also saying that we need a focus on youth and women's empowerment programs. I think the next thing where we want to do is how we deal with some of the more specific. We looked at the high level issues where we talked about the basic income grant, we talked about the need for reparation, with the need for increased access and we don't want dry bones. I think that point is well made. I think what we're also saying is that we want to work smarter. We want to bring the disconnect between what government is saying they want to do on paper and how do we expose it. We want to bring the CEO of Atlantis, SEZ, Matt Kaplan, to your area in Atlantis, my comrade, and say, what are you doing for our small business there? Because it's all lip service and it's about connecting. My role as a public servant is to ensure that we pull together. What we'll do is I'll ask my office to summarize the issues, pull it together. I also want to thank all of you for making time on this Freedom weekend, Freedom Day weekend. Part of this thing is about us connecting again. Look, we've said in our introduction, we're not going to do the blame and we're not going to fight over scarce resources. Whether you colored, whether you African, whether you Indian, whether you, we all are, we need to show solidarity. We need to see each other, whether we foreigners, whether we South Africans, we need to see how we can work together. We need to move away from the them and us. We need to pull together. And part of us is that we must see that abundance theory. We must see the win-win. We must be able to say, let's help each other, because when you are helped, I feel helped. And so the solidarity that we are going to express is one, that we're going to help ourselves. We're going to pull it together. And so I want to start by just saying thank you to everybody. Thank you to Comrade Nomi, our convener of ETC, for pulling it together. Thanks for initiating this. She invited us to this session in Nyanga that started this ball rolling. We've connected. Thank you, Andrew, the advisor to the minister, for just being there behind the presence. And I know that we're pushing that we do more. We're doing amazing work, but we need to do more. Our members, Nadia from the Youth League, will definitely put together the minutes. Comrade Pindile, also comrades from the different areas. I want to thank all of you. Comrade Pillay, who's a budding entrepreneur that's looking at a chef school, helping our kids get opportunities. So we're trying to contact and make connections with all of us. We will share the notes. We will share the summaries. My office have captured the video. What we'll do, we won't share a copy of the video, but we'll make a summary, a summation of all the presentations. And then what we'll do is maybe we'll see if you want to volunteer to help us coordinate things together. What are the concrete things that came out here? So, Comrade Veronica, I know you're a very practical person. Maybe you would want to help, or Lenny would want to help to say, okay, what are the key emerging themes that we can package together? So access to finance, next outreach, how do we help each other with getting ourselves organized? Because we don't just want to complain and lament. We want to mobilize ourselves to getting these opportunities. And next time we want captains of industry in the room. Next time we want our business leaders to say, what are you doing for our township economy? And so that is going to be a key thing. Comrade Gumbi, thanks for being there. Comrade Bridget from Mitchell's Plain, we see you. So with that, I want to just say thank you, everybody. I know it was short notice, but we pulled it off. I'm very happy. Thanks, Comrade Lorenzo from the office that made all of the arrangements. Comrades, we will pull it together. We will make contact. I think there is almost an email list. So if you have registered, we will send the notes and the next way forwards in those emails, that group email, and then we take it from there. If you want to be part of a planning space, maybe just WhatsApp me. If you have my number, WhatsApp me, and then we can get a small team, maybe 5-10 of us, to process all the issues and plan and present to the bigger group next time. But this is going to be a continuous engagement. Look, at some stage we're going to be physical, but I think for now, given that we want to cover a national footprint, we want to touch all of us and connect with all of us. With that, I'd like to conclude. I want to thank you all so much for making time. Have a great Freedom Weekend, and wherever you are, be safe and be good, and continue showing solidarity and love to our people, and continue to serve wherever you find yourself. Thank you very much, everybody.
Aman, love, diamond,
Can I allow Mr. Chair?